Hello, my name is Bruce Tanis. I'm CEO of Connect for Commerce. Welcome to our video series where we interview experts, entrepreneurs, and those who have been there and done that. My hope is that the small business tips and tricks in this video series and in our blog will provide expertise and real-world experiences that will help you solve your problems in your business. Today, we're discussing with Carla Minogue about how small business owners can work with the media. Carla has been a news anchor and a reporter and still works for the CBC on a casual basis. She's also the principal at Anchored Communication. Carla, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
First, before we start discussing working with media, I think it's important that we define it a little more. There's been a lot of changes in the media landscape in recent years, and so I think it would be important that we think about that and find out how you would define who and what is the media.
That's a fair question, Bruce, because like you said, the media landscape has changed so much over the last 10, 20 years and continues to change on a monthly, weekly, daily basis. So there are a few different categories of media. In one sense, every single person is a journalist. Anyone who has one of these. So it's called citizen journalism, basically. So if you have a smartphone, you can record anytime, anywhere. And people are posting on social media. This comes with some pros and some cons, of course. The pros, we're capturing things and news and video and images that we maybe never would have before. And we're basically everywhere now as journalists. The cons being this basically the same as the cons. We're capturing all of this stuff, and sometimes it's going out without any filter, and we've seen a rise in things like fake news as a result. So another kind of bucket of media would be the influencer category, which has also grown and developed substantially over the last several years. So influencers being, the bloggers, the social media influencers who have dedicated audiences, and some of them are huge, where they share content and they make big bucks, many of them on advertising and things like that. And if you get a mention on one of their YouTube channels or Instagrams, it can be a huge boost for your business. So that's another sort of form of media. And we can also earn coverage with certain influencers if we're very selective in how to do that. But when I'm talking about media in the sense of media relations and traditional media, I'm exactly speaking about the traditional media. So the newspapers, the television stations, the radio stations, the people who are trained journalists who have been trained how to put together a story in a fair and balanced way and follow sort of the rules of the journalistic standards, if you will.
Yeah, okay. That's an important differentiation for sure. As we're thinking about this new landscape, what are the public relations activities that you think will likely bring the most benefit to the average small business?
Well, there are a few things that come to mind. The first being just really having an understanding of what your story is. So this is more than public relations. This goes to the branding, to the core of what your business really is and what it does and who you are. What is your story? What makes you unique? What do you have to offer to help you connect with the audience? So in order to do any sort of media relations, earned media, public relations, you need to have that story figured out. So learning how to differentiate between something that you want to promote and something that's actually newsworthy is also sort of a key learning. So something that's newsworthy may be different than like something that you want to talk about, right? So it's figuring out how to connect the dots between the two and figuring out how to make that happen. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So something else I wanted to touch on here is that there are two different kinds of media relations. So you can do proactive media relations and be prepared for reactive media relations. And it's important to have a little bit of both in your back pocket. So proactive media relations being when you have a story that you want to share, figuring out what makes it newsworthy, how to pitch it to journalists, and how to get it out there in an earned capacity without having to pay for that coverage. That's That's proactive. Reactive is being prepared if something happens and the media come to you and start knocking on your door, and how to make sure that you are prepared to defend your reputation as an organization or company.
Fair enough. And that both are important, really, in terms of what might happen. You always have to think of that reactive piece that you might be involved in a story just because of something that happens, and what does that look like. But most of us are also wanting to get our story out there. Generally, what types of media are most receptive to small business stories?
Well, it really does depend on the story and where you are, and sort of what story you have to tell. So if you're more industry specific and focusing on more of a business to business audience, and that's another thing, it's who your audience is, right? Because we're very strategic in why we do media relations and how we do it. So who is your audience and how do you reach them? Earned media and media relations is one way to do that. So where are your audience members? Are they members of the Construction Association? If so, can we get an article into the Construction Association magazine or trade publication? Is your audience more moms and people like that? Well, then maybe we want to look at some mommy bloggers or influencers in that area who are highly trusted in that sense. And are you looking for just basically very broad, general awareness, in which case we can look at a wide variety of media. So depends on your story. If it's really locally focused, your local radio and newspapers can be a good start. If you're looking for a bit of a broader story, we look at ways to broaden it out. So Connect for Commerce is a really great example. Typically, a local entrepreneur starting up a new website wouldn't be news. So how do we connect that to a broader story? And how do we connect that to something that's in the news cycle that's very timely? So Bruce, you and I looked at how we could do that. And we talked about how you were starting this business at a time when small business owners and entrepreneurs needed it most, at a time at the height of the pandemic, and needing a place to connect where they can grow, sell, and learn. And so that's how we came up with a way to get broader interest in the story. And you ended up on CTV, News Talk Radio, a few other high profile news outlets. Yep. So it's about being thoughtful and strategic in how we design stories and how we and who our audience is and how we want to reach them.
I think you hit the nail on the head with what we were doing, was just trying to be relevant both to our audience and to the needs of the media at the end of the day. So I know a lot of small business owners don't have much experience working with the media. Can you give our audience a few tips on how best to get the story out to the media?
Absolutely. So again, it's all about figuring out what your story is, what are you trying to say, and why. And so then we need to figure out what the news hook, what the news angle is. So it needs to be timely, it needs to be relevant, it needs to be interesting, and if possible, have a human element or some sort of a tension. That's what media is looking for, right? And it doesn't have to be tension with your business. It can be tension or a problem that you are solving. And so in your case, that was helping small businesses and entrepreneurs connect at a time of need. So that's sort of the tension, the human element being the fact that you're a local entrepreneur yourself who has gone through a lot of these challenges and are helping others now. Okay, and it's timely because it's in the middle of a pandemic, and it's relevant because it's in the middle of a pandemic and when businesses are at need. So I'm just using Connect for Commerce as an example of, how we broadened it out and went beyond, a new website being launched in Alberta. So it's making sure that you're also prepared for any interviews that may come your way. These are opportunities. Anytime you do earn media coverage, it's just an opportunity for you to share your story and share your message. So you need to know what that message is so that you don't walk away from an interview saying, well, that's not what I meant to say, or that's not what I said, but in fact, it really was. So it's being able to control the interview and control what is put out there as much as you can. Because at the end of the day, when you're doing an interview with a journalist, they're the ones that put it together. They're in charge of figuring out how that story is presented to the public. And so we have to do everything we can to make sure that it comes out the way we want it to.
Well, that's a great segue into the next question. Say a small business owner does land an interview with a trade publication, local media, or some other media outlet. What's the best way they should answer the questions they're being asked?
Well, the key is to answer the question and then deliver your message.
So a politician.
Don't be a politician. How much does that drive you nuts when you're watching TV and you see a politician?
Crazy. They don't even answer the question being asked.
Well, and a lot of them have been trained that way, to be fair. It's sort of an older method, in my opinion, of media training, bridging and blocking, trying to get out of the tough questions and work your way around it. So my goal is to always help my clients in media training and media relations learn how to answer the question. And it really has to come from a state of honesty and transparency as much as possible. Obviously, there are things that can't be said or, different ways of communicating. But we always want to try to answer the question as best we can. Sometimes the answer to the question is, I don't know, or I can't talk about that right now, or I can't speak to that. But as long as you can back that up with some solid reasons and proof, it's usually going to be accepted. So answer the question, deliver your message. So every time you go into a media interview, you have to remember that the journalist has an agenda. Chances are they've come to you with a story in mind already. They kind of already maybe have a sense of what their assignment desk is hoping that they can do, what they think the story is, as much as they try not to go into stories like that. But you also have to remember that you have an agenda. You have a purpose for doing this story, whether it's because you want to get your message out in a proactive story or because you're defending your reputation and want to set the record straight. That's your agenda. So answer and deliver. So a lot of media trainers have their own little acronyms and, tricks and formulas for doing this. One of the ones that I like to use is, it's just really basic and kind of boring, but it's just A, B, C, D. So you do your alphabet and you can do media relations and answer questions. A is answer the question. B is back it up with some sort of proof, evidence, anecdote, example. Back it up. That's really important. Then you cue it up and deliver your message. So C is cue, D is deliver your message. So queuing it up can be also used as a bit of a bridging. So when you're answering the question and getting ready to bridge to delivering your message. I'm going to give you an example with Connect for Commerce, if that's okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
And we went through this when you were doing all your media stuff. So I know you already know it. But okay, so let's say I asked you, why did you start Connect for Commerce in the middle of a pandemic? So one example of a way you could answer this. The answer, well, many small business owners and entrepreneurs are struggling, and I think Connect for Commerce can help. That's why. That's the why. B, back it up. The CFIB estimates that 1 in 6 small business owners are considering closing permanently. So that's the why. You're backing it up. Entrepreneurs and small businesses are struggling. 1 in 6 are going to close. Cue it up. What I hope to do is, so we're getting to your message now. We're getting there. What I hope to do is, D, deliver your message. Bring businesses and entrepreneurs together in one platform where they can buy, sell, learn, and grow their businesses. If someone needs to sell equipment in a hurry, they can find a captivated audience of potential buyers here. One example. You have a lot of other messages that would fit in there as well. So A, B, C, D. And so that'll just ensure that. There you go. Done.
I'm going to run on a little bit, but I do listen to what you're saying because it makes a whole lot of sense.
It helps a lot. I recently did some interviews for a STARS campaign I was volunteering for, and I'm rarely on that side and this side of the interview. And I found it to be very helpful just to remember, okay, answer the question and then deliver your message. And before you go into any interview, have 3 key messages that you want to get across. just 3. If you need 5, okay, maybe, but typically 3 is a really good number. The rule of 3, it's how our brains work. So 3 messages you want to get across and deliver them.
Just so our audience knows, Carla does back her words up with actual practice. She provided me with 3 key messages that I've been working on as we work through our media opportunities here, and I've kept them in the back of my head. Do one of those key messages apply in this particular question that we're answering that I need to work my way back towards as answer the question, and I try and provide some proof as to why I answered or an example like you said, and then finally work my way back to at least one of the 3 key messages as we go. So she walks the walk and as well as talking the talk. So
well, I'm glad it's been helpful, and it has made a difference. If you watch someone's first interview versus, after doing a few, you start to kind of get the hang of it, and figure out sort of what it is you're trying to say. And those key messages don't have to be repeated word for word. It's just mostly the general message that you're trying to get across, right? So it doesn't have to be, and you can repeat it. And I encourage you to repeat it over and over and over again, because the more someone hears something, maybe in a little bit of a different way, the more it's going to sink in. And that's how you control the interview as well and keep it on track where you want it to be.
Totally. So, the next question I think a lot of people would have, business owners would have, how often should I be talking with the media about their story? How often should I reach out to them?
Well, and I wish I could say, once a month or once a week or once a quarter, but it's not as simple of an answer, just because it's not just reaching out to media for the sake of reaching out to media. My first question to you would be, well, what's the story? So do you have a story to tell? If you have 2 amazing stories in the same week, go ahead, pitch it, or maybe hold on to it for a week to make the most out of the opportunity. But if it's really timely, you don't want to hold on to it. So if you don't have stories that are actually newsworthy, then you don't just pitch and send out a news release with nothing in it. And so first of all, it's what is the story? It's nice to have sort of a steady drumbeat of earned media activity kind of going throughout the year. And that's when a media relations strategy can really come in handy. So you can look at all of the different sort of buckets of media that help you reach your audience, and you kind of tie them all together. And then you figure out sort of what story fits with each of those media buckets and that audience. And then you can spread it out a little bit so that you kind of always have something happening in market. That's what I like to do. If you're asking me, like, how often would you pitch me at CBC a story? It would totally depend on the story. Typically, they're not going to do a story about the same business over and over and over again. But if it's the same business doing something really good for the community that they really can't ignore, then there's nothing stopping them. And there's nothing stopping you from pitching one story to CTV, one story to CBC, one story to Global, right? So it doesn't always have to be like one story to everyone all the time. In fact, I'd encourage you to be more specific and targeted and thoughtful in your media relations activities. Gone are the days of doing up a press release and just blasting it out to everyone on the Alberta media contact list. That does not work, I can tell you. I have on my CBC email 200 emails, 300 emails from this morning, and it's news releases and emails from PR people like me. And so you need to try to cut through the clutter. And how do you do that? By being really targeted and strategic and thoughtful and showing that you've done your homework. So it's figuring out who's writing about your space and how can you connect with them in a way that makes them care about what you have to share. And that will get you a lot further.
A follow up on that idea, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Is there any value in cultivating relationships with certain targeted people and letting them know that you're an expert in this particular area? If there's a plumbing problem and everybody's pipes are freezing, like in Texas or something like that, maybe they can call on you to for a comment or what have you. What do you think about that?
Exactly. I think that that's a really great strategy. Where'd you get that idea from? I'm just kidding. So I wonder. Yeah, no, I think it's really wise, because especially if you do have a lot of extensive background in an area and can speak with authority on certain topics, it's a great idea to build relationships with shows, with people. So I don't know, maybe it's Danielle Smith. I know she's gone now, but you work with someone on Danielle Smith's show and you let them know that you're a great speaker. You deliver your messages, you help them out in a jam when they're looking for someone to talk, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and someone that they can come to that they trust, that will be able to help them out as well as help themselves out. And so building relationships is key. It's absolutely key. It's harder than ever because journalists have zero time to go for coffee. It's not that we can do that anymore right now. But, back in the day, it would be like, hey, do you want to go grab a coffee and, chat about this or chat about that? And now, good luck. I mean, maybe occasionally it will happen, and it depends on what kind of journalist you're targeting, but it's more about just showing your worth and putting yourself out there as an expert in your area, and over time it will come.
Okay. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to ask if you had any other advice that you'd like to offer for business owners on working with media.
Well, when you're asked that question, your answer is always yes, I do have more to say. That's one piece of advice. Do you have anything else to add? Lots of people say, nope, I'm good. But this is your golden nugget opportunity, I always say in my media training. So I'll take it, Bruce. Okay, so one thing I just want everyone to remember is that media relations should be strategic and thoughtful. And it's based on relationships. It's based on knowing who you're reaching out to, making sure you have a newsworthy story, not just blasting everyone with something that isn't relevant or isn't newsworthy. So it's being really thoughtful on that end. Second, journalists, some people are really worried about working with the media, right? They're scared that the story will get spin out of their control. Just remember that journalists they're not your friend. They're not your enemy. They're just after a good story. And so it's kind of key, because the not your friend piece is just as important as the not your enemy piece. If you have a good story, just remember you have an agenda, they have an agenda, and you try to control where that heads. If you're talking,
for instance, just as a practical piece, that don't say anything that you don't want to end up on the story. From the moment you talk to them to the moment you hang up, just remember that everything you say could be public. So we've seen that with politicians. It doesn't happen so much with business people, I don't think. But, if you say something off what you think is off the record, probably is not off the record. So that's the not your friend part.
You literally took the words out of my mouth. That's next on my list. Whenever you're speaking with a journalist, it's never off the record. If you think that you need to have an agreement, a special sort of agreement where you need to be a secret source or need to be off the record, you need to make sure that you fully trust the person and that you have some sort of a really solid agreement, whether it's in writing or something in place. Don't just assume that because the camera isn't rolling or you're off the record. I have so many examples in my media training of people who thought they weren't speaking on the record, and it just burns them. So that's such good advice. And whenever you are speaking to media, just remember it is a performance, because anything you say or do, it lives forever now. Yes. It goes on the internet and it lives forever. And so, make sure you're on point and not saying anything that you don't want in the public realm.
I have to tell my teenager that, don't say anything online that you don't want to live forever, because that's the truth. There are people being burned for something that they said online 10 years ago. Well, you might have got away with it 10 years ago, but they're going to apply the standard of now, 10 years from now. So you need to never say anything online or to a reporter that isn't going to live forever. That's for sure.
It takes a long time to lose that if it does happen. And finally, Bruce, my last point is just to remember that every interview opportunity, every opportunity with the media, see it just as that. It's an opportunity for you to share your story and to deliver your message. So I am always more on the side of leaning into those opportunities. Lots of people tend to shy away. You have to convince me why we shouldn't do an interview more than you have to convince me why we should. And so we need to always weigh the risks and benefits of doing media interviews. So that's a bit of a process as well. So I encourage you, everyone, to lean in and consider what an earned media relations strategy can do for you. And if you ever need help, you can always turn to someone like me.
Well, thank you, Carla, for taking the time today to share your expertise and your views with our viewers. Sure appreciate that. And we'll look forward to hearing more about media strategy from you on your blog and
yes, and I need to get on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for having me, Bruce. I really appreciate it.
We've been talking to Carla Minogue today about small businesses working with the media, and we sure appreciated her viewpoint. And thank you for joining us today to connect with experts and others to buy or sell your business equipment, lease space, or learn more about growing your business. Please check out our website at connectforcommerce.ca.